Hi everybody, Matt Kliskowski here, and got a tutorial for you here that is based on something that I see quite a bit of out there, and that is long exposure photography. Basically what happens is people generally will put they'll either do a long exposure, most of your cameras will do up to 30 seconds, and then you can set your camera to what's called bulb mode, which means that you can do an exposure as long as you want, as long as you hold down the shutter. And it helps to have a cable release to do something like that. Now, what I see happening a lot is there's a lot of neutral density filters, be it a 2-stop, a 3-stop. I mean, they sell them all the way up to 10-stop neutral density filters that really cut down the amount of light that's going to hit the sensor and lets you keep your shutter open for much, much longer. And what it does is it tends to really blur out the water. It tends to blur out the sky. You get these streaks along the sky. Looks great, but then whatever's staying still in the photo, in this example would be the city skyline, still looks tack sharp. So what happens if you don't have a neutral density filter, or if maybe you look at the effect and you're like, oh, I kind of like the streaky clouds or the blurry water? There's some things you can do after the fact that kind of helps out on this. So what we're going to do here is I'll show you what we can do on the clouds. I'm going to go grab my quick selection tool, and I'm just going to just kind of draw over the sky here, and then hold down the Option or Alt key to take it into subtract mode to get rid of that. Now, it's not perfect. So what we're going to do here is, besides trying to get in there and try to get it perfect, I'm going to hit Refine Edge, and I'm going to use the right bracket key to make the radius brush a little bit larger, and I'm just going to just paint right along. Okay. And right along the edge, just like this. So we got a radius refined. We'll come up here. We'll see if we can tweak that slider a little bit. Doesn't make too much of a difference. And then we'll click OK. Now I'm going to have a selection of the sky, and I'm going to press Command J on the Mac, Control J on the PC. There's one thing I'm going to do here. I'm going to zoom way in because I can just tell that it didn't get all of this tower. So I'm just going to take my quick selection tool and just kind of paint in up here on the tower just to see if we can get some of it. It'll save us a little bit of work later on from having to go in there with a mask and do it by hand. Yeah, there's a little bit over here too. There we go. All right, so we have our selection looking pretty good. We have the sky selected, so I'm going to press Command J on the Mac, Control J on the PC, and now we have that sky punched up onto its own layer. Next thing that we want to do is we want to Command click on the Mac or Control click on the PC to put a selection background in this layer, because we're going to run a blur filter on it. If I don't put a selection on it, it's not going to work right. So we're going to put a selection on it first. Come up here to the filter menu. We're going to go down to blur, and I'm going to choose radial blur. And then what we need to do here under blur method, choose zoom. Under amount, you can experiment with this. I'll show you a couple of different settings here. I'll crank it up to about 80. And then you can even click inside of here. Like, to me, the clouds are starting to form and kind of zoom out from there. So that's why I'm going to pull it back down here to this corner. But you can move wherever the zoom happens. You can move it around. So I'm going to move it down to this bottom corner, and I'll click OK, and I want to show you what happens. So we get that streaky cloud look, which actually looks remarkably close to what it would look like with a neutral density filter on and a long exposure. I think it does a great job. To me, it's too streaky. So I'm going to Command Z to undo, and then come back up here. We can run that radial blur filter again. I usually find that somewhere around 40 to 50 looks good. If you want to get really artsy with it, you can go higher, but I think 40 to 50 works pretty good, and I keep it at the good quality. It works just fine. So I'll click OK here. And now we get some of the streaks in the clouds, but they're not total streaks to where it looks like a Photoshop effect. It's just kind of looks like it's just a longer exposure here. So that's before, that's after. Once again, before and then after. And now, if you want to get really fancy with it, you can make a selection of the water, okay, because the water is not a really long exposure either. Come up here to the filter menu, come down to blur, and instead of the radial blur, you would do motion blur, keep the angle set to 0, and then just experiment with the distance. If it's too low, it still looks choppy. If it's too high, it just looks weird. So somewhere right in between here Click OK. Deselect, and now you've even got the water to have some of that streakiness to it. So a couple different ways that you can go with this. The water is a little bit more, to me, I'm not as crazy about the effect on the water, but I really like what it does to the sky, because I think the streaky clouds, it gives the photo some movement, but at the same time you kind of have that contrast of, you're able to see the sharp buildings and the sharp foreground here, but you still get that sky, which looks like it has some movement. To me, that makes for a really compelling photo. Hope you guys enjoyed. My name's Matt Kloskowski, and I'll talk to you again soon.